Cause the wicked hide behind the cloak. And if you stay in the mist, you gon' be soaked. So listen up, cause this hair of the dog. What's real, what ain't? Is this the fog or smog? Cause there's a difference when you breathe it in. So don't let the corporate media take you for a spin. This that morning show, they put you in the know. So I hope that you ready. All we do is go, go, go. Yeah, come get your info, you gon' be like, whoa. Hair of the dog, we bout that, ayy. We in the zone, we out here, yeah. Spitting the facts.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Wednesday. I am Carrie here with DLF, and this is Hair of the Dog, the cure for the neoliberal hangover. And I'm not gonna lie, I feel hungover today after everything that's gone on this week. So we're gonna cover apparently a topic that needs to be covered, and this is ethics. My opinion is there is absolutely no gray area between right and wrong. There are only the excuses we give ourselves. Do you agree? Do you not? Today you can weigh in, and if you're watching this, whatever channel you're watching on, go ahead and send us a comment, provide feedback, argue, tell us where we're wrong, all of that. So purely interactive today. But before we get into that, let's get with our lovely and talented co-host straight from Canada. This is Andy Kennedy. Good morning, Andy.
Morning.
Yeah, you're well rested from your vacation, I see.
Well, I'm actually feeling quite good today. I was rather tired yesterday. You know, it's we have a short turnaround this week, right? Because it's my and Deb's 25th wedding anniversary today.
Oh, wow. Congratulations. I had no idea.
Thank you. And we have rented a little cottage north of us, just for the two of us. And then on the weekend, my daughter and her boyfriend are coming up to join us, and just some downtime to kind of rest and reflect, and and again, abuse my liver.
Your poor liver is probably sitting on the side going, oh God, Andy, please, no more. You quitter.
Well, and see, one of the momentous things that didn't occur because of 2020 was the music jamboree that Deb and I always go to every year, and it's always in the same weekend in August, and of course it was canceled because of the pandemic. So it would have been last weekend, right? So there was a need for us to, go out and at least misbehave to some degree, like we would have, right? Because our bodies are obviously expecting it, right? Because it's been going on for so many years, And so, but this is a good year. If it has to happen, this is a good year for it to happen, because typically we're at this jamboree when our anniversary occurs, and so we don't necessarily get to celebrate it as momentously or as robustly, let's say, as we should. And so this year, because it was canceled, we have the opportunity for the two of us to just go up and enjoy a cottage, and put our feet up and relax and enjoy nature.
Not the natures. Well, this is nice. This is nice. So, but you're empty nesters, so every day is anniversary day, right?
Yes, absolutely. I'm going to have a lot of time to reflect on how John Kasich says I should live my life.
Well, that's actually part of our conversation this morning, and we'll get into that. Before we do, I want to show a real quick, we can do commercials now. So this is one that Andy helped put together, and he did the lovely voiceover. So take a quick listen to this, and then we'll get right into the question of ethics, right? So I'm thinking in terms of Les Miserables, and my French is terrible, but
certainly it is.
Thank you. So that entire theme was on morality and where's the gray area. So we're going to talk about that, and John Kasich is going to feature prominently, as well as some other notable figures. So real quick, here is the ad, so enjoy. We'll be right back.
Neo Citizens is launching something truly special. They are building a global community for progressives. We know that being a progressive isn't about where you come from, but where your heart is. We seek truth and make decisions based on empathy, science, and a deeper economic understanding that prioritizes investment in people and our planet. We know that together we can create a better future for everyone, and now you can be a part of history in the making. Neo Citizens has launched a groundbreaking new project. Trump's Wall of Shame joins voices from across the globe to demonstrate that we are truly in this together. He couldn't build his wall of hate, but we can build our wall and help leading progressive causes too. Digital Liberation Front is proud to partner with Neo Citizens, recognized for our commitment to progressive ideals of independent journalism, dispelling misinformation, and for living the message as the nation's first employee-owned, all-union media company. Join us and help build this wall.
So welcome back. The reason that I wanted to show that ad, not only is it really cool, and it's about a really cool project, but it fits into our conversation about ethics today. So news is coming out, and we've seen this. If you've been on Facebook, and we are on Facebook, that particular platform is disproportionately catering to the alt-right, in particular groups that favor Holocaust denial and all manner of things that we would consider in a reasonable society detrimental. So this particular group, Neo Citizens, is working on an alternative. So the risk is that progressives and people who are center and center left put themselves in a bubble. And then on the flip side of that is giving your money, time, and energy to an organization that seems to be openly catering to the alt-right. As progressives, we need to make a decision about where we will vote with our dollars, our time, and our talent. We here support the work that Neo Citizens is doing, and we are also on the Facebook platform. So what's the right answer here? This one I'm not really sure about, but as we get into some of these other more concrete examples, we're going to explore cause and effect and ethics. So for example, Andy, just a hypothetical scenario. How many plane crashes would it take to ground one particular type of plane? Like, for example, if I came out with an experimental new aircraft that was adopted by travelers, and 2 of my aircraft failed, crashed, and killed everyone on board, how many more would we accept before my airline was grounded? Take
all of them.
Yeah, all of them. So
All of them.
okay, so that's exactly what happened. We had a particular manufacturer who came up with a new aircraft, was sold to commercial airlines, and 2 of them crashed. And that was enough to ground that fleet worldwide so that they could have further investigations so that people would be safe. Now let's translate that into the loss of human life in the United States over the last few months. The deaths from COVID alone, and we're just talking deaths. We're not talking about the people who are recovered and suffering from chronic blood clots, liver failure, kidney failure, all of these things that we now know people who have recovered are dealing with. We're just going to deal with that death total because that is the number that seems to be most important to other people, but only in a cerebral sort of sense. So the death rate is the equivalent of 50 of these passenger airliners crashing every week. 50 over a period of several months. Do you think that we as a society would maybe pay attention if we had 50 commercial airliners crashing every week? Would we do something?
I think the answer would be it would seemingly be so.
Okay. So in this case, is it that 170,000 people is just too abstract a number, that we actually need to see the bodies of women and men and children piled up in front of us in a macabre display to really get it? Is that where we're at? Because it seems to me that we are fundamentally lacking ethics here when it comes to death. We have so many people saying it's a hoax, or it's overblown, or they don't understand basic math, even though there's enough people, enough death, and all of these other issues that that 6 degrees of separation. Everybody knows somebody who's been touched by it. And here on our network, one of our patrons just tested positive a few days ago. So we hope for the best for him. But everywhere, somebody has been touched by this. And yet, here in this country, it's being used as a political tool. And it should never be. That is ethically, in my opinion, that is ethically a morally bankrupt way to look at things, to politicize things. And it's easy for the left to point to Trump because it's so blatant. Let me reverse it. It's easy for the left to point to Trump, but Trump is also pointing to the right and saying that they're being marginalized, all of this sort of thing. So in my estimation, it's being politicized by both the Democrats and the Republicans. And I want to talk about how. For example, Medicare for All. We know that, like in Canada, where you get sick and you recover from COVID, you are not now burdened with a medical expense. You are not putting off care because of a medical expense. But here in this country, we do. So people who are recovering and had to be hospitalized are looking at hundreds of thousands of dollars across the states, the country. It's what, $78,000 if you needed ICU care, $32,000 if you didn't, but that's your hospital stay.
And a large number of those people no longer have jobs.
Right, and insurance. So where is that expense going to go? If I needed to be in the hospital and I can't pay that bill, then the hospital has what's called a bad debt write-off, and they charge it back to the state. So all of my neighbors get to pay in higher expenses and in taxes. But these are the hidden costs that we don't see. So here it goes back to ethics. While the leaders of our two or binary party system are using it as a political football, the people who are affected are us, and it doesn't matter where you fall on the political spectrum. They prefer that I am arguing with my conservative neighbor rather than looking at them. And let's keep in mind, behind every politician that you see on TV is an insurance policy you paid for, right? We can't even purchase the platinum level policy on the marketplace or anywhere else that they are currently getting on our dime. So that's an ethical question, especially when we're looking at Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. And we are being told that you need to fall in line and vote for them, and never mind the fact that they are acting unethically when it comes to the American populace, that there is such a great threat that you need to set aside your morals and ethics on these basic points in order to defeat this great evil. And I wanted to bring up a quote from one of our team members, Virginia, who is always a delight and so insightful and snarky. But she mentioned,
And my favorite commie.
yes, exactly. She brought up I think she succinctly articulated what a lot of us are feeling. So I want to bring it up. Here's her quote. And she said, we were talking about this is the most important election in your lifetime. And her response was, you ask, what is survival if it ends up with us picking the best of two evils in perpetuity? We already have been picking the best of two evils. For half a century, I've seen this, and Virginia is that old. For half a century, we've seen this. Every 4 years, there's urgent reason to vote for a shitty Democrat. Because of Vietnam, because a woman's right to choose, because Reagan, because Bush Cheney, because Trump. We never have a chance to vote for something. And the more I thought about it, I think that absolutely goes to an ethical question, right? So we are continually dealing with the ultimate threat. We must do this. We must unite against this. And this week was, as the DNC convention is going on, we're seeing it in real time. All you need to do is look at the speaker lineup to see exactly where the priorities are. So you brought up, Andy, John Kasich. What do you know about former Ohio Governor John Kasich?
I know that he's been a proponent of some very Republican and conservative-esque policies through his career.
Yeah, so I lived in Ohio under Mr. Kasich, and twice I had my civil rights violated. Twice. I had my vote taken from me. And the second time I actually almost got arrested. So this was under Ken Blackwell, Secretary of State, a gentleman of color who was part of the Republican Party, and he took it upon himself, working with John Kasich, to limit the number of voting polls, particularly in Black communities. So they were very famous for reducing voting rights of people of color. And at the time, I happened to live in a 90% minority community. I was like the only white person. So our polls had been reduced down to one area. And this was happening across Columbus, Akron, Cincinnati, all over the place. So it happened to me, being the only white person standing in line. There were a couple people who were called out, but I was pulled out of line, my vote challenged, and I was given a provisional ballot. In Ohio, they don't count provisional ballots. So basically, they nullified my right. And this is something that John Kasich has been famous for, as well as many others in Ohio. As famously, he's also against a woman's right to choose, all of these other things. But this is the man that the Democrats put up front to speak. And he also had the audacity to decide who got to be a member of the Democratic Party. And apparently he's right, because the Democratic Party approves comments and all of these things that go forward as a representative of who they are, right? He was not censured for talking about progressives and progressive policy, in particular AOC. He got to decide who is a member of the Democratic Party as a Republican. Is that ethical? As a leader within the DNC, as a voter, not a constituent, but a voter, a member of the DNC, is that acceptable that you would allow a Republican to come in and decide who gets to be a member? What do you think, Andy?
I might be a bit of problem with that thinking, right? Especially when these are all backroom dealings and nothing is ever talked about it. That's never talked about in corporate media. And, it's obvious, quite obvious that this is another corrupt agenda of a already corrupt group.
Well, I would agree with you. And in fact, here's the statement that Pelosi put out that one of our lovely folks, I'm not sure if you can read it, that might be too small. See if I can make it bigger. But it's a statement that Pelosi put out where she, had this nice little list and it was all thoughts and prayers. Where have we seen thoughts and prayers before? Right? Something happens, oh, our thoughts are with you, our prayers are with you. No, you have the power to actually do something, and that is quite literally your job. Your job as a representative is to carry forward our hopes and dreams and enact them in policy when you yourself are not doing it. So I just want to say thank you to a big M4A Sandwich. I love that name. Who was helpful in correcting Nancy's error here. But the problem is somebody like Pelosi wields power in Congress because she gets to decide what bills actually come to the floor, what stalls in committee, who actually gets a vote, whether it's a roll call vote or how they're going to do it. So she helps decide those rules. And this is a person that has been put in place who is exhibiting questionable morality. So it goes to the question of, well, for the greater good. And I personally heard this as a member of the Democratic Party. For the greater good, you should step down. For the greater good, you should ignore criminal behavior. For the greater good, you should vote for the lesser of two evils. Where's the greater good?
Well, and I think that once you start to understand how the system works, you realized that the greater good is basically just a filter, right? That means that if any policy has a possibility of becoming law in the U.S., it has to go through the filter of is this going to cost profit opportunities to my donors, right? What's the price tag on this? Is this if we enact this, will this cut into their profit margin? And if the answer is yes, then it doesn't get considered.
And that is such a short-sighted viewpoint. And in fact, early on in my career, I saw this in corporate America, and I used to write management op-ed pieces and research stuff. And I noticed early on when we went from a quality, sustainable model over to quarterly profits and tied those profits to CEOs, not only did you see the quality diminish, but jobs left too, because we were so busy raiding the treasury of a company, in particular in our IT space, that became a piggy bank for companies. And that led to all sorts of issues like your customer data being stolen, just customer service going overseas, all of these things. So if we could see it in the corporate space, why would we not see it also in the political space? And Andy, I think you're absolutely right. When we're catering to the donors, it is a short-sighted model, and we have so many historical examples that tell us this is a fool's errand to do this. And in fact, we're up against, climate change, which has been described as a extinction level event, not a crisis, extinction. And it blows my mind that it feels like both parties are in denial about the effects of climate change, but we can see it. We can see it. And I'm looking at places in the Southwest right now that are led by typical conservatives who understand what is going on, and they are doing pragmatic, responsible things in the areas of water conservation and sustainable energy, but you're never going to hear that on corporate media. All that we hear from the larger narrative is that it's not as important as you think it is, right? So there's the problem. But Real quick, shout out to Mike, who joins us this morning, who says, I refuse to make a deal with the demon to fight the devil. The demon is the only one who wins in that deal. Great point, and that goes to our ethics. So anyone else wants to chime in and tell me exactly where I'm wrong here, or, you know, Andy's never wrong, but you can try. Feel free to weigh in with your comments. But I want to put up this other tweet by David Sirota. And it's not just David Sirota's comment, but the rebuttal that came from a gentleman by the name of Ron Lewis. I don't know, Ron is a fellow American, I'm assuming. But David Sirota sent out this tweet that says, I know our memory is only 15 minutes long, but Colin Powell went on a global television to issue the longest diatribe of absolute lies in modern political history, resulting in the deaths of 1 million people and him then getting rewarded with a DNC speaking slot. So just real quick, I remember that. I remember Colin Powell, and I had so much respect for him. Everyone had respect for him. But I happened to be homesick that day, and I was watching his address to the UN, and this goes to the lead up to the Iraq war, and his presentation about the semis of mobile chemical warfare thing. And you could see during his presentation, he didn't even believe it, but he was there kind of with his head down speaking because he was told to do this. And I just...
Owing the party line.
Right. And I remember just being so heartbroken watching this because you knew he was lying. He knew he was lying. Everybody in the UN knew he was lying. We went to war anyway. And 1 million Iraqis paid for it with their lives. But the rebuttal here, I think, is also integral to this discussion. So Ron's point is, he says, point taken, but you know the game as well as anyone. Wrangling all the voters we can muster includes whoever the hell Kasich and Powell bring to the booth. So right here, Ron he is explaining to everyone what the whole strategy is here. That it doesn't matter if we're lying. It doesn't matter if we're selling out our policy. It doesn't matter if we have flipped the entire platform of the Democratic Party to ignore and dissolve ourselves of anything from the left. We are going full on catering to the right and conservatives and all that it entails in order to bring those people in. So if you've been watching for a while, you've heard me talk about how things are here in Illinois. And I always laugh when somebody says, oh, this is a Democrat-run state. It's not. It is not. We have Republican chairmen in counties who are open and laugh about how they run Republicans as Dems because, number one, here, they only look at the D behind a name, not necessarily the character or the policy. So you have so many people who have been elected as Democrats, and they're really not.
And there's one thing that a lot of people don't know is that, Carrie, you actually tried to dye your hair blue last week, and look what happened.
Right. Yeah, I don't know that I'd look good in blue. So, yeah, and this is part of the problem. We keep compromising our morals through our platform, right? Just like a budget is a document of your morals, a platform is the ideology that you will ascribe to. Those are your ethics. And what did we see? We saw the platform committee wholly reject Medicare for all. And I don't know how you look at a pandemic. I don't know how you look at all of these people who have been unemployed, lost their insurance, and tell them that they don't matter, that it's not worth it, you know, for the profits, right? So those are your ethics. If those are Democratic ethics, what's the difference between Democrats and Republicans? Why not have Colin Powell? Why not have John Kasich? Why not have the entire pantheon of the Fox News, Tucker Carlson? Bring him on. Absolutely. Do it. Why not?
Sure. Absolutely. Exactly. right? Somebody made a meme on Facebook that showed a lineup change that said that Margaret Thatcher would be speaking.
She could be, right?
Right?
So,
Like, I mean, this is all a way for the DNC and the establishment to remind the largest voting bloc of how they used to vote before Trump, right? And just to remind you that, you know, life was really good for you under us, and that we need you to come back and help us reestablish the status quo so you can keep all your stuff, and the people really that don't matter, like the age group that's below you, you know, doesn't get a foothold in determining what happens in the United States. It's that simple.
well, it's the divide and conquer. And that's exactly what they're doing. They're dividing us. Like, for example, this to me was an epiphany and life changing. When I was a volunteer for a progressive candidate running for Congress, the first thing he said to me and my business partner is, he's like, I want you to go and put together a Tea Party focus group. And I want you to take all of the 10 pieces of the progressive platform and talk to them about it and see where they are. And so, of course, we put together this rowdy group of 10 Tea Party women. And there were, I'm not going to lie, there were French martinis involved. But we had a great time. Because we got to sit face to face with these 10 women and ask them questions and hear from them what their concerns were, what their understanding was of something like Medicare for All, what their understanding was of the federal jobs guarantee, and listen patiently and then come back and explain it to them the way it actually is. And by the time we left there, after an hour and a half, we had Tea Party people, die-hard Tea Party people, in absolute agreement of 9 out of 10 progressive policies. So what we're seeing is that it doesn't matter where you fall in the political spectrum. Progressive policies apply to working people, working, retired, disabled, students, the 98%. And when you have leadership who's catering to the donor class, the oligarchy, they need to keep us fighting. They need to keep us at each other's throats. They need to keep us arguing over minutia that is not in line with the bigger picture. So that, again, goes to ethics. But one of the things I thought was interesting, and I don't have a counter to that, Brett Hume, who is a notorious ultra conservative to the point of what the fuck did he just say? He made a statement about Democrats and their morality by having a large speaking platform for former President Bill Clinton. Now, a decade ago, it would have seemed reasonable. But what we know now about Trump's relationship to a deceased but notorious pedophile sex trafficker, we can point to specifically. But Trump was not there by himself. He was there with former President Bill Clinton. We don't know specifically what former President Clinton has done or has not done. However, there is far more evidence, circumstantial and otherwise, testimony from women whom we're supposed to believe, that suggests maybe this isn't the person that we want to have front and center in the Democratic Party, and maybe we want to withhold some of that in the instance that more information comes forward that suggests that this person has probably done some things that should not have happened. Instead, we gave him a platform. So,
Yeah. Isn't that lovely?
yeah, I just, it's concerning to me. And I posted it on my Facebook, and I know that I'm going to take a lot of heat from people on the left, but I just, there's no gray area here, right? And I was trying to explain it to somebody. They're like, well, the latest was there was a picture that came out of Bill Clinton getting a neck massage from this woman who had been sex trafficked and shared like a party favor on behalf of Jeff Epstein to numerous people. She alleges that she's been used by numerous people. And we saw the allegations against, a member of the royal family, and there's some credibility here. But they have yet to get their day in court. They've my frustration is the FBI started an investigation long before all of this came out, and you had the two sisters who reported what happened to them, and Epstein got off. And what happened was all of the elite in New York and around the country had no problem ignoring all of it and flocking back to Epstein because he was a man of means who had connections and all of these other things. And boy, did he donate a whole lot of money to other causes. So it's easy to overlook that. But Andy, if the allegations come out that I robbed a bank, nobody's going to flock to me, right? I mean, I had simple allegations from my own party that I was actually a Republican because I questioned leadership. Nobody came to my aid. So I think there's a monetary component that goes with it. It's part and parcel. So where's the ethics there? Right?
There isn't any, right? That's the problem. It's the money that backs it, that drives society. That the reason why, Jeff Epstein, and he allegedly committed suicide in prison. Okay, sure. Yeah, everybody believes that. But it's the covering up of that part of society. And we have to protect our own against all other things. And we're seeing that now, right? Look back at a year ago when, the straw that broke the proverbial impeachment camel's back was that they went after Biden's son, went after one of their own. We don't care that they're locking kids in cages. We don't care about any of the absolute horrible things that Trump's done since he's been in office. It's that he went after one of the chosen people. And that can't happen. And it doesn't matter if we impeach Trump or not, as long as we give the impression that we're against him, because we're still going to pass his military bills and all that.
Well, that's exactly right. And you brought up the impeachment, and the biggest criticism about the impeachment was you had all of these things that were easily proven that we could have gone forward with impeachment and had built a really good, credible case. And Shahid Buttar wrote about this before he even threw his hat in to run for office, because he's, constitutional. Isn't he a lawyer, a constitutional lawyer? I believe so.
I think so.
Okay.
I believe so. I can't recall off the top of my head, but yeah.
Right. So he had this compelling piece that's on our website now. But to your point, the reason that Pelosi chose to go with a very narrow 2-minute phone call was to spare Biden's son.
Of course. And the ultimate goal is never whether or not the impeachment proceedings are successful or not.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It doesn't matter, because as embarrassing or as put off that you might be by the way Trump behaves, he's still a member of the same swamp. Right? It's just that he uses monosyllabic words, and is orange, deep orange in color. So that's the only difference. Is I've strongly believed that the one major thing that's driven Trump's policy through his entire presidency is basically just undoing everything that Barack Obama did, simply because he so badly embarrassed him at the correspondence dinner when the whole thing went down with the birther conspiracy, right? And so that's why one by one. That's why the ACA needed to end. Right? That's why anything that Obama was able to put in place needed to come to an end, because that's the only thing that it was driving his agenda.
Right.
Right? I'm absolutely sure that that's what it is. That's why, right? You have a piece of perfect legislation like the TPP that gives businesses the ability to sue for lost income before they've lost it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It had nothing to do with trade. It had everything to do about globalization and corporate takeover of government decisions. And it was absolutely ludicrous and horrible on its face, and nobody knew about it. Well, why would somebody like Trump, with a document like a policy like that would make more people rich, why would Trump want to so adamantly get rid of it? Because Obama was in power when it was put in place.
That's exactly right. And I think I keep thinking back to the interview that we showed last night with Brandon Johnson and Frank Ryder, because in that same context, you have Trump. Okay, so for those who didn't catch it, please go watch it. Frank was a skinny little white guy back in 1965. He was an intern in law school who was down helping with civil rights in Northern Florida. And if you don't know the history of what was going on in Northern Florida, fascinating interview. So in the context that Andy, you're talking about with Trump's got to do everything opposite. So here we have Trump, who is obviously racist and catering to racists and now just not even trying to hide it. But then you had the Democrats who were, doing all this celebratory stuff of MLK. But in Frank's interview, I think the jaw-dropping point was he kept making illustration after illustration that Democrats or liberals didn't like MLK until he was dead. So long as he provided a voice and was talking about things that they were uncomfortable with, nobody liked him. Nobody. So now here we have that same dichotomy of Trump, I hate the black guy, and I'm going to dismantle all these things that he has done. And then on the other side, the only one who is resisting are the people, not necessarily the leadership.
Exactly. Right. Like that's the whole point of all of this, is that there's a two-party system in the United States. We've talked about this on numerous occasions, and I like to quote George Carlin when I say it's a great big club and you're not in it.
Right. And I think the thing that is most disheartening for me is in this question of ethics, right? Because we are asked to compromise our ethics in order to defeat this new great evil, or we're in order. And I'm not gonna lie, even within our own organization, we have varying opinions. I think the thing that holds us together is that we are grounded in progressive policy. How we achieve the reality of enacting those policies, not just for the greater good, not just for morality, but damn survival. That is what holds us together. So we are still family here, but we are having our own disagreements. Okay, so Brandon just weighed in. Brandon says, calling back to his interview, he said, they especially hated MLK when he shifted his focus to the poor over racial issues. And yeah, as a progressive, don't we find ourselves in that position too? And then he also says, poverty is measurable and readily identifiable via metrics where race is not. And he's absolutely right in that too. So this is where we fit into the progressive space. It's we're looking out for people and how policies and financial investment affect the 98%. So
yes, exactly. We have, I think that we like to claim the moral and ethical high ground as progressives. The problem is we don't have any of the voice. Right? We don't have. We have a limited amount of voice that we hope ourselves and our compadres in the social media, independent media community can hopefully try to have a stronger voice in that. But we currently, until this time period, have never had the ability to give people the straight goods and tell them how badly they're getting screwed or what the truth is. Right? It's always been the neoliberal and neoclassical voices that are heard above everything. Like the internet is still a very new thing in terms of the time that's passed, right? And the social movement, and people realize that, okay, I was one of the first people on Facebook. Well, Facebook was the first real, global, all-encompassing way that people could keep in touch with one another, right? And the earliest people were members since 2007. Right? That's only 13 years ago.
Right, exactly. Well, okay, so you brought up a point about neoliberals. I do have some criticism of progressives that I want to get into because we are not without fault. So my favorite term is a faux-gressive, but even a progressive can slip. And there are a couple examples that I want to get to real quick. So one is, okay, so in Florida right now is going through their primary. So if you live in Florida, you have friends and family in Florida, please get them out to vote. And one of these races, once again, Debbie Wasserman Schultz has a challenger, Jen Perlman. So Jen and Debbie made news in Miami because a 16-year-old volunteer for Ms. Perlman's campaign was assaulted by Debbie Wasserman Schultz. It's funny how the news campaign says shoved. No, it's criminal. It's called assault. What she did to this 16-year-old, right? Martina Velasquez. I cannot roll my R's. My apologies to Martina. So a police report was filed, and basically the incident was like this. You had the 16-year-old who was out there campaigning for her candidate and talking about global climate change and saying that Miss Wasserman Schultz is not a friend to the environment. In fact, and I've seen this here in Illinois, the only environment in air quotes, group that has endorsed her was the Sierra Club. And we know the Sierra Club are complete and utter sellouts when it comes to campaigning. They will always pick the neoliberal incumbent, regardless of fracking or all of these other things that they're like here in Illinois. I lost my shit over the Sierra Club endorsing a fracking enthusiast over an actual candidate who was doing something good. So, so this 16-year-old was out there handing out cards and doing what she could to help her candidate. And Debbie Wasserman Schultz shoved her, pushed her, spoke over her, called her a liar, and did all of these things that warranted the police to take a statement, and a complaint was filed. So you would think that this would be a rallying cry for progressives in the area. You would think that having a candidate as viable as Jen Perlman campaigning in this district where you have so many people who are there as immigrants, who are immigrants from climate, from all of these policies from Puerto Rico and what's been happening, that they have moved into Miami and Central Florida, that you would think that the progressives there would be helping and leading the charge. And then what I saw was this. This is William Byatt, I think his last name is. Byatt, I'm not sure how to pronounce it. William Byatt is a Sanders delegate. He was elected as a Sanders delegate to the convention. So this guy is sitting there with a vote, and his statement when it came to Ms. Perlman was, I have very significant policy disagreements with Congressman Wasserman Schultz. Now let's not forget that Wasserman Schultz is also profiting from children in cages and all of the incarceration. She's literally profiting from it. But he says, I have disagreements with Congressman Wasserman Schultz, but in order to mount an effective challenge to her, we would need to see a lot more widespread grassroots energy than Perlman has been able to get. We, as South Florida progressives, have other priorities.
A little bit of a contradiction in terms there, isn't it?
Yeah. So my first thought was William, and I asked him this on Twitter. I'm like, isn't that your fucking job as a Sanders delegate to help a progressive like this with the policies, or are you just holding space?
Or what are your other priorities, Willie?
Especially in Miami, where the city is starting to feel some serious effects, not just a loss of property, but risk to life because of what's going on with the sea level change, right? So here's a guy who should know better, who's been elected as a Sanders delegate, who is shunning a progressive running to unseat Debbie Wasserman Schultz. So he's not the only one. I don't want to lay this all on his shoulders, but he put himself out there. This is for every progressive who, once they got a foothold, did not extend a hand behind them to lift the others up, right? That is an ethical issue that speaks to character and morality. And this is in the progressive space. So you have someone like this that we are still giving a voice to, this William guy, and he gets to participate in the DNC convention and do all of these things, but he is neglecting the primary that is happening right now. Has he done anything to help this candidate earn votes, reach voters, talk to voters? Has he done anything? I don't know. I've asked him, haven't gotten a response. But that quote is enraging, right? So it's real easy for us as progressives to, like you said, Andy, take the moral high ground, to believe that we have the moral high ground. But the DNC members believe that they have the moral high ground right now too. So we've constantly got to be checking our behavior. And this goes for when we are vote shaming people too, right? So,
Especially when people are being vote shamed.
mm-hmm.
Right? That's absolutely horrible. I mean, the entire idea of voting is I will choose to vote for someone whose policies are in line with my own. As a Canadian, if I was an American, I can absolutely say that I would not have voted for either candidate since the 60s, because there's not been a voice for in politics since then that stands for anything that I stand for.
Right.
So the horseshit of voting to defeat Trump is just a way for people, and as we've talked about before, to lose their power of voting. If you're going to be told you have to vote for this guy because of what that beautiful post that Virginia put, because of Bush Cheney, right? Because of Trump, because of Reagan, because of Vietnam, right? Why? Why is that the only reason that I can choose as a progressive to vote in this system? And ultimately, you have to say to yourself, that's not enough. And the people that come back at you and say, well, you're responsible for Trump. Well, you know what? You can also turn it around and say, sure, I don't mind. You tell me I'm responsible for Trump. Why? Because you're responsible for giving me another shit Democrat candidate, right? That's on you. That's not on me. Why should I vote for this person? Give up my voting power because Trump, right? Once again, in the umpteenth election, you're giving me an absolutely horrible candidate, just slightly better than the Republican person to vote for, right? What reason would I have to vote for that person if they're going to just go back to the status quo and vote against everything that I hold dear in my heart? There's no reason. So screw you in your vote shaming. Screw you in your horrible Democratic candidates. I refuse to vote for them. And if the result is Trump, that's on you.
Right, and we're seeing this argument everywhere. And my response to people is, okay, I'm never going to tell you who to vote for. And if you feel strongly that you need to suck it up, hold your nose and vote, go for it. If you are feeling like you're not going to vote, I would ask you, please, the only thing that I am actually going to push on is if you are undecided on that top race, please vote for everyone down ballot, because as progressives, we have fought tooth and nail, and some of us are not like this William character out of Miami. We have actually busted our asses to get progressives through the primary. And when I tell you it has been warfare, like I talked about the number of death threats I've actually gotten. That's not unique. We are fighting so hard for these progressives, and they are winning their primaries. Look at West Virginia. They had something to vote for, not something to vote against. And they elected, well, they got all of these women as progressives through the primary. If you don't vote and you don't vote down ballot, we lose so much. So I'm never going to vote shame anybody on that top, because it is a heinous choice. And just another example of voting for something. I don't know if I've told this story before on our show, but I was in Ohio when Barack Obama was running for president. And the voter turnout for that race was unbelievable, because we had something to vote for. And it wasn't the hope and change. It wasn't necessarily what people were voting for. What they were voting for was symbolic. We were about to elect the first Black president. And honestly, for myself and other people, had he been a Rush Limbaugh, still might have voted for him, because we were voting for something symbolic.
And it gave people hope.
Right. So the story that I like to tell was my son at the time, he was in 5th grade. And of course, he had a bedtime. And election night, it looked like Barack was in the lead, but there were still, you know how corporate news does. They like to keep you in suspense. So he was watching that, and he was like, might not happen. But it made him go to bed, because he had to get up the next day for school. And when I woke him up for school, now for those who don't know, my son is Black. So it was the first time he saw in his short lifespan, first time in my lifespan, that he saw somebody who looked like him in a potential position of power. And he went to bed that night, and when I woke him up the next morning, he rolled over, and in his sleepy little boy voice, he said, "Is Barack Obama still my president?" And I still get teary, because what he was saying is how we all felt. We had something to vote for. And I think that is what we're missing. And I think that is what the people in the DNC who are not paid to give a shit, they don't have to listen to you. And they've told you that over and over and over again. In fact, 3 weeks ago, they just voted you out of the party and the decision making, and nobody blinked. All of these people who are vote blue no matter who, have you even bothered to look up the rules? Have you looked up the platform from 2016, which was far more progressive than what they're arguing about now? So what I need you to do is, if you're still undecided, before you decide to vote shame or before you decide to argue with somebody, please consider that everybody down ballot, if everyone so far who has made their primary gets elected to office, we have flipped the House from Democrat to progressive control. And we are right now working on flipping the Senate from Republican to Democrat. And holy cow, what a difference would that make?
Right, and that's so important. People don't realize how important that is, right? You now have an entire voting bloc in Congress that has the ability to hold both parties accountable, right? By withholding their vote, right? If it's not, if you're going to try to pass a bill that doesn't take the people into account, then the progressive Democrats in Congress can say, no, this doesn't, there's no reason to. And so they can control what happens. And that's huge, especially right now.
Yeah, we have the potential to have a new Speaker of the House who is a progressive. And I've seen several names floated, people who are actually on the progressive side. So, yeah, this is the point that I want to kind of leave people with, that to me, there is no gray area in ethics. There is only the cause and effect and what you're willing to live with, right? So we know right and wrong, and we need to be the kind of people that we teach our kids to be. We need to live that. And when we're saying that having Bill Clinton on the stage is okay, I want you to translate that into your own personal life with your family and friends and what you're saying there. So real quick, in the interest of ethics, we did get a slight retraction. Annie, we were talking about the story on Monday, The Intercept and the hit piece that went out on Shahid, who is challenging Nancy Pelosi. So the author of that story, who was published on The Intercept, okay, so I had to laugh because, Andy, you said that the hit piece comes out on the front page and the retraction is page 36. And that's exactly what happened. So The Intercept did not necessarily publish or advertise the retraction. What happened was the author put it on her Twitter, and then there's a really tiny line at the end of the article where it's been updated. So I just want to put that up real quick. And of course, I had to weigh in because I'm a snarky. So here it is here. So Miss Lacey, who was the author of the story, said, "We updated this story based on new reporting on the original sexual harassment allegations against Shahid Buttar, which was part of what pushed left Bay Area groups to reconsider backing him, but wasn't a focus of the story and the reports of staff mistreatment." First off, Lacey, you're full of shit. That's a lie, but nice try. And then what the retraction was is that Elizabeth Coindon, the retraction that they put in there was that there was some new evidence that came to light that she might not be above board ethically and a good place to witness on this. But I had to note on her, and I replied to Miss Lacey, I said, great. No update on the statements from the same ex-staffers saying Buttar was paid $100,000. Facts easily disproved via FEC reports, which we did hear on Monday, from Wild herself. Jasper Wild is the one who came out with her allegations that started this whole ball rolling. So I asked, is a retraction pending on that? Still no word. Any clarification on Wild's donations, citing no campaign employer affiliations from October to November. So that is also kind of a sketchy thing, but Lacey did not respond to any of that, nor has she offered any type of rebuttal on these things that are easily proven. So if you want to go back to our Monday episode, my take on that was, number one, if Lacey was publishing for our network, it's my job to make sure that there are multiple sources, that due diligence has been done. And Rome will tell you, I'm a hard ass when it comes to, okay, if you're going to make a statement, it needs to be provable and backed up. And did you check? Did you go to these sources and check? And it took me 7 minutes to disprove Lacey's own work. at The Intercept. So I'm happy that they at least came out with something, but to me it looks like it was a half-ass attempt. She's still lying. Lacey, you're lying. You've gone past the point of um, unethical operation as part of your journalistic integrity to outright lying in your tweet. And I'm calling you out on it. And you neglected to do your due diligence yet again. So what you've done is taken an old hit piece, refreshed it to hit the news cycle yet again. And that is unethical. Should never happen, ever. So that was The Intercept's retraction. So way to go, Intercept. Yeah, so much for your journal.
Keep trying. You'll
Yeah.
get it.
And this is Ryan Grimm. I'm like, come on. So yes.
Clearly, Lacey's Google machine is broken, right?
And all the editors, Lee Fang, all of these people. Come on, really? So so that's my rant when it comes to The Intercept. But yeah, so we'll keep up on all these stories. But Andy doesn't know this. We have a special guest coming up Friday that I'm very excited about because she wrote this amazing piece. I had the privilege of interviewing her before. She's blogger Amira Napier. And she wrote this piece in response to the WAP, the Cardi B song about feminism. So Friday, I am so excited. She's going to join us here to talk about the piece she wrote. So it's going to be me and Amira against this white man, Andy. So it'll be fun.
Yeah. I'm pretty docile though. I'll I'll
Right.
probably end up on your side.
We're gonna browbeat Andy. So, as my husband says, if you're white and male, you have no opinion. You have no chips in the social stack. So there you go.
Yeah, well, what are you gonna do?
Right.
Unfortunately, actually, if you look at it and you know how things work in elections, the results last night from District 23 in Florida were predictable that the corrupt politician with all the name recognition ended up getting somewhere close to 72% of the vote in that district, and Jen ended up, with 27% or whatever it was. There's, which we understand, but that's a really good number for someone with no name recognition who, in their first election, in a place where a lot of people think that democracy goes to die, right? In Florida, right? Clearly, there's argument to be said about the fact that people in Florida have chosen to fight the coronavirus by putting their head up their ass. But I wouldn't say that myself.
Of course not. Of course. Well, okay, so it's too soon.
I know, it's fresh.
You're right, it's too soon, but I would suggest that Jen, I hate to do this because I know what candidates go through, I know what their families go through, but Jen, please consider running again. Please.
I think she's already stated on her Twitter feed that this is not the end. And we would be, of course, so much better off with candidates like Jen. And quite honestly, approaching 30% in this race, in this place, is actually quite good. And I'm very proud of her. I think she's been, she's a friend of progressives everywhere. She fights the good fight. Basically, we've seen that over and over again. And I just wish her so much success and wellness and everything that she does. And when she's ready to strike up the band again, we're going to be in the percussion section.
Absolutely.
So.
Absolutely. And for those who are just discovering who we are, this is what we do, right? We're independent media. There's a lot of independent media out there, and I'm very happy to see it. And we support them in every way, that we possibly can. Great stories, we'll share it with our network, but we are the only true employee owned and soon to be all union media company in the country. So what that means is not only are we media buy-in for progressives, but we're actually trying to live that brand, the ethics that we talked about. So while other media outlets like TYT and Alternet claim to be progressive, but are actually firing and harassing people for talking about unionizing, we're doing it here, wall to wall. We don't have corporate donors, we have patrons. So if you like what you see, if you want to have a way to contribute, the way we do it is through patron support. And we invite our patrons to help us guide our programming. What do you want to talk about? What do you want to see? What kind of information is important to you? And we put the work in to research the stories and get those out to you. So already we've had so much tremendous support, but obviously this takes money to run the technology. And what would be really cool is if we could pay some people even part-time to quit their job and work on this full-time. How much bigger could we grow? So this is why we have the Patreon support. So for as little as $3 a month, you help us grow and counter CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, and all these other news outlets that are totally driven by profit and report based on that profit. So we'd rather cater to you and you know, the truth in reporting. So
Exactly. We want to be on the side of always taking the high ground every time. And if for some reason that doesn't occur, we want to be told about it. We want to, you know, we also want to be called out on it. And our retractions will be on page 1.
oh, absolutely. And I will be out here front and center. The only, okay, if you talk about my hair or what I happen to be wearing, then no, you're going to get snarked. But if
or your lighting. I've seen that's been a soft spot too.
Yeah, lighting sucks. But if it's something that I say or something that I put up that is material is factually inaccurate, I want to know. I want to know, and I will be the first one up here front and center going, yeah, I screwed up, and here's how. Because that's what adults do. That's what accountability means. Intercept. So on that note, I'm done, and I can't wait for Friday. So Andy, any closing thoughts?
No, I think we've covered it all, and I have to pee.
All right, so we'll get out of here. So everybody tune in on Friday when we will have Amira Napier here to talk about her wonderful piece and all the blog writing that she does. It's really, really good. So we'll be back here at 10 a.m. Eastern on Friday. Until then, please stay safe and enjoy your day.
Hammer the dog, we bout that A. Bringing the song, we out here, yeah. Spitting the facts, how it's supposed to be. Hammer the dog, we keep it G.